Today, we're heading to the top of the South Island to an epic coastal track in the Marlborough Sounds. Let's talk about the Queen Charlotte track. Kia ora and welcome to The Tramping Life, a podcast about hiking in Aotearoa, New Zealand, or as we call it here, tramping. I'm Chauncey, and in this episode I'll talk about a specific track or hut. I'll give an overview and share my experience, along with the highlights and some practical advice. One of New Zealand's best-known coastal walks, Queen Charlotte Track runs for 71 kilometres between Queen Charlotte Sound and Kenepuru Sound at the top of the South Island. It's typically walked from the historic Ship Cove in the north to Anakiwa in the south. The track follows ridgelines and shorelines, offering varied terrain that undulates between sea level and hills up to around 450 metres high. Over its length, the route passes through lush coastal native forest, across headlands and around numerous bays and coves. The Queen Charlotte Track differs from most dock-managed tracks in that portions of it cross private and council land. A Queen Charlotte Track land cooperative pass is required to access some sections between Kenepuru Saddle and Anakiwa, with fees contributing to landowner support and track maintenance. There are 6 dock campsites along the track, but no dock huts. There are a range of private lodges, though, that can offer luxury accommodation. It's also possible to get your main bag transferred by boat between lodges close to the dock campsite. I walked the track in mid-November 2020, when despite the New Zealand border being closed due to COVID, the track was busier than normal according to the water taxi company. It was before peak season though, so other than the big group described later on, there were only about a dozen people hiking and cycling on the track. The 50-minute water taxi ride from Picton to Ship Cove was as scenic as any journey by boat in this area. Ship Cove is a beautiful spot, and it's understandable why Captain Cook chose to spend 170 days over 5 stays here during his 3 epic voyages. There's a sizable monument to him, erected in 1912, paid for by public subscription. From here it was uphill along a real gash of a track, which looked relatively newly cut. I'm not a fan of dual-use tracks. They're often dull to walk along, and you have to watch out for bikes. But given the logistics of this track, you tend to only see them twice a day going in each direction. Apparently the track is roughly half walkers and half bikers outside of summer. E-bikes are becoming increasingly popular, and it would be well suited to the hills, particularly after Camp Bay. After half an hour I reached Ship Cove Saddle with views of the inner and outer Queen Charlotte Sound. Heading down to Schoolhouse Bay campsite gave me wonderful views of the stunning coloured waters of the Sounds. Across the bay was Resolution Bay Lodge, which looked inviting, but I was staying at dock campsites rather than the flash lodges along the track. There were more big views on the way to Tower Saddle. Near Blue Water Lodge was a particularly photogenic jetty, and lots of batches, or cribs as these are on the South Island, which are scattered throughout the Sounds, often only accessible by water. A short detour off the track took me to a 30-metre high rimu tree, one of the oldest in New Zealand, over 1,000 years old. There was a lovely short section of track through towering gravity-defying tree ferns. After 26 kilometres and 6 hours of walking, I was glad to reach Camp Bay campsite by late afternoon, though I hadn't anticipated having to carry my main bag from the nearby Punga Cove resort to the campsite. For some reason I thought it would be waiting for me at the campsite, and therefore I'd gone a bit crazy with what I'd packed, assuming that I wouldn't need to carry it any distance. I arrived just after a pair of bikers from Christchurch, with whom I'd played tortoise and hare all day. We were on the same water taxi out and passed each other about half a dozen times. I caught up with them when they stopped to film with their GoPros or struggled with some of the hills. I was a bit concerned after arriving at the camp to hear about a group of 40 people in their mid-20s on their way. They were a group of friends from Canterbury University originally who meet every year for an adventure. Thankfully, only 10 were staying at Camp Bay campsite, the rest at a nearby lodge. They were pretty well behaved after an initially worrying start when they hit the beers as soon as they arrived. I was surprised that they'd caught up with me on the track until I learnt that they'd walked from Ship Cove to Furnow Lodge and then got a boat from there to Punga Cove. The next day, they had 40 mountain bikes shipped in for them to cycle on to Te Araroa Bay and then a boat back to Picton. One person in the group sorts out logistics for their trips. Pretty impressive work. The next morning I was working by birdsong, which is a lovely way to start the day, but perhaps not at 5 a.m. From Camp Bay campsite, it was straight uphill to Kenepuru Saddle, with 24.5 kilometres of track today, following the ridgelines of a peninsula between Kenepuru Sound and Queen Charlotte Sound. A lookout over the unimaginably descriptive Bay of Many Coves was pretty spectacular. and there was no shortage of good views along the track, helped by perfect weather. Mid-20 degrees, blue skies and strong winds which helped keep things relatively cool. Day 2 was much hillier than day 1, though it felt easier to me for some reason, despite being basically the same distance and duration. Along the track are handy distance markers every 5 kilometres. Te Saddle, there was an unexpected memorial to 29 local soldiers who died during World War I and World War II. Just down the hill was my home for the night, a very pleasant cowshed campsite. Before I could set up, though, I had a 600-metre return road walk to the portage to collect my heavy main bag to set up camp, after which a dip in Portage Bay was the ideal refreshment. The birdsong was even louder the next morning, again starting from 5 a.m, and the steepest section of track was up to Te Saddle, but the views more than compensated for the effort required. There were lovely views of Kenepuru Sound from the ridge on one side and of Picton in the distance on the other side. There was one spot with a couple of benches offering wonderful views of both the sounds, along with an inquisitive weka, one of many seen along the track, particularly at the campsites. While day 2 had arguably the best views, day 3 had the most interesting and varied track. Day 1 just felt long. Track headed down to the water, relatively uncommon on the Queen Charlotte track, particularly when compared with the able Tasman coast walk. Just after noon, I arrived at Anakiwa at the finishing point for the track. I had nearly 4 hours to wait for the water taxi back to Picton, but there were worse places to spend an afternoon. The highlights include plenty of dramatic coastal scenery, with sweeping views over the Marlborough Sounds, sunken valleys and peninsulas, framed by native bush and rocky headlands. Ship Cove is a site of historical significance, where Captain James Cook anchored and where interpretation panels recount early Maori and European interactions. There were fewer swimming spots than expected, but any opportunity to go for a wade or a swim was welcome, and having my main bag carried was a treat, and I could have bought meals at the lodges, but for some reason unclear to me now, I ate dehydrated meals instead. To finish with some practical advice, most people complete the Queen Charlotte track on foot over 3 to 5 days, although sections can be walked individually if time is limited, as there is plenty of places along the track accessible by water taxi. The track surface is for dual use, so you may want to wear lighter footwear than on other tramps, though some sections are muddy and steep. Most of the track is rated as grade 3 or 4 out of 5 for cyclists. In advance, book the water taxi to Ship Cove, luggage transfer services, the land access pass and any lodges. The dock campsites also need to be booked all year round. While it can be walked all year round, the most popular time to do so is between November and May. Cyclists are not allowed on the track on the section Ship Cove to Kenepuru Saddle between December and February. Finally, as a comparator, the Able Tasman Coast Track has much better beaches and swimming spots and is an easier walk, while the Queen Charlotte Track has more dramatic scenery and has more historic sites and is more of a challenge. Thank you so much for listening to The Tramping Life. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please follow the podcast in whatever app you use. Tell a friend about it and consider leaving a rating or a review. It really helps more people discover the show. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email at thetrampinglife, one word, @gmail.com.